I want to talk to you guys for a minute about bias and how it works and how it affects people's ability to review and report on things in the tech world. This is something that I see all the time. In my opinion, the tech world, reviews, previews, these sorts of things are being absolutely overtaken, overwhelmed, and ultimately destroyed by the desire to have this edgy, hot take kind of thing going on. Look, I get it. These edgy, hot takes get you clicks, and being negative gets you more clicks than being positive almost all the time. A headline that says, wow, this thing is really cool is not going to get you as many clicks as I can't believe such and such would release this mess. It's just how the world works. It's how people's minds work. But it's not, in my opinion, a good thing to be doing. And I want to talk for a little bit. Of course, this is going to center around Surface Duo 2 because I think some of the reporting has been a little unfair. Not all of it, but some of it has been unfair. But you can extend this out into other facets of the tech world and really just into the world proper, where people have a certain idea about something, so their bias coming in won't allow them to see obvious things right in front of their faces that could alter their perspective. They've heard what they've heard, and now they're looking for only things to confirm the bias they already have, not something to overturn their bias. So they're not worried about being correct. They're worried about just confirming what they already thought, and that is a massive problem for critical thinking, for reviewing. How can you review a product if you don't allow yourself to change your mind? If you come in with a preconceived notion and then you won't allow that to change. So let's look here at a couple of examples, because I posted a thread on Twitter the other day talking about a list Android Authority put out. And look, I cite Android Authority from time to time. It's generally a good website. And I don't know this author. I don't know anything about this person. I have no idea. So we're not going to talk about the author. We're just going to talk about the text that was written here. And let's talk about kind of what I think is going on. So Android Authority posted this here. This was their list of top smartphone fails. You could immediately argue that maybe this list just shouldn't exist altogether because it's focusing on the negatives. Why would we celebrate negatives? Why would we take a moment to kick things when they're already down? So I've talked about how Nokia failed to deliver updates to their PureView phone, right? But I wasn't doing it in sort of a mockingly celebratory sense. I was doing it in a hold them accountable kind of sense. And I just don't get the feeling, maybe I'm reading this the wrong way. Maybe you guys read this article and think I'm totally off base on this. But that's just not how this came across to me. This came across as, ha ha ha, these things sucked. Let's poke fun at them. And I just don't know personally, that's not something I'm really interested in reading. So in this article, they talked about how the original Duo showed some promise, but it was a bit of a disaster. And I have no problem with that. Just like I said here, it did fall short. There are issues. Android 11 still isn't here. It's got problems. No problem with what they're saying there at all, but we are talking about Duo 2. So let's move on. With Duo 2, they talked about how, hey, they upgraded, a lot of things. They made the SoC the top of the line SoC. It's got NFC now. It's got a triple camera setup. They addressed all the complaints that people really had with it. So great, we're doing pretty good so far. But then they say something like this: the issue is that the large gap between the two halves of the phone interrupts the workspace. And this is something that I have banged on about and banged on about and banged on about, because I do not understand how people don't understand this better. Surface Duo is meant to have two screens. That is not a disadvantage. It is an advantage. And I've talked about this so many times. Now, I'm honestly getting sick of having to say this, but this is dual monitors in your pocket. Okay, so in this article here, the issue is the large gap between interrupts the workspace. No, it divides the workspace. It doesn't interrupt it any more than I have a monitor here and a monitor here. You wouldn't come into my studio, look at my monitor and say, the problem here is that that's two monitors and there's a gap between the two of them that interrupts your workspace. Wouldn't it be better if it was one continuous monitor? No, it would not. They make ultra wides and I don't want one because I want two divided, partitioned workspaces. I have a workstation here and a workstation here. And you can literally see this on an MRI. Your brain lights up differently when you partition your workspace physically rather than through software. I know that some people think This was just Panos Panay talking out of his you-know-where, but there's actual science to back this up, and I promise you that this is the case, okay? So on a normal Windows desktop or on a phone, you can multitask, you can split window, right? You can do this kind of thing, but people don't do it. I don't even do it. Like when I'm using my Surface Pro 7, which is sitting right here, whenever I'm using that thing, I could easily split window a thing and a thing, but I don't do it because it doesn't feel good, and my brain doesn't interact with it in the same way. But when I'm on my Duo, and look, you can't say that it's screen size because that's stupid, because these things, screens are smaller than that, and I do it all the time. I am constantly running 2 apps simultaneously on my Duo because they're physically partitioned. So you come into this thinking, this has a hinge down the middle, therefore it is inferior to folding OLED devices that have no partition down the middle. And look, this is based on some assumptions here, again, because I don't know this author, we've never spoken before, but this is just what it seems like to me, and this is what I see this written constantly. I see it written all over the place. This has a hinge down the middle, therefore it is inferior to this, because your preconceived notion, the bias you have coming in, is that this one continuous screen is better than this. So you will not allow yourself to think differently, even though if I tell you why I use dual monitors rather than an ultra wide, you'll likely get that. That will make sense to you, okay? Because you have no preconceived notion there. Or the preconceived notion you have is that dual monitors is actually better for multitasking, but as soon as we fold it up and we put it in our pocket, you don't get that anymore. It's just out of your brain. You have no ability to understand that, because what you've been told is that Surface Duo sucks. Therefore, nothing can really be good about it. That's the bias. Let's keep rolling on because it continues. They mentioned that few apps have been updated with true support for the larger display footprint. So I think what he's talking about here is app spanning. And yeah, he's absolutely correct about that. Almost no apps have been updated to support spanning. If you don't know what we're talking about, basically, if you take an application like Outlook and you span it, well, now you have your list of emails here, and then you have the actual email itself over here. And very few apps have been updated to support that. So look, I'm good with that. I have no qualms with that take at all, but let's keep rolling. This gets really weird to me. Moreover, relying on the individual screens for anything leaves you feeling cramped due to the smaller footprint. So I don't know in what world this is a small screen. And I can understand here if what he said was the aspect ratio was not something that they enjoyed, but to say that this is a smaller footprint is objectively just false. Look at Duo next to a full tablet. This is not a small footprint. This is two very large screens. Now again, they're wider, right? It's a wider aspect ratio. So certain phones, certain applications are going to look a little bit different. So let me give you some examples here. If we go to an app like Instagram, you're going to notice here that the full image sometimes will overlap. So some images will fit just fine. Some images are actually taller than what you're going to be able to see, and then you don't have the description there. Now you can look at this two different ways though, right? So you could say, look how big that image is. I can see so much because it's so big. But then you could also say, well, I also might miss some of the text down here because in that first image, it's too tall, so I have to scroll to be able to get to the caption. So there's two ways to look at this, right? Huge image is one thing, but lack of height this way can be a problem. Let's go someplace here like YouTube though, right? This is a Pixel 5, which is not the hugest screen in the world. It's just what I have sitting around here. But like, which screen would you say has the larger footprint? Look how big that video is. This is a pretty normal size screen. And let's be generous and imagine that it's actually a little bit bigger than that. How much bigger would it have to be for that video to be the size of that? It would have to be enormous. So we have to be careful in how we word things here, because if he had have said the aspect ratio can make certain apps cramped, I would say we can have a conversation there. But he didn't say that. He said that it's a smaller footprint, which is objectively not true. Let's do another app here. How about Google Maps? Which device has the smaller footprint here? The pretty normal size phone screen or Surface Duo or Surface Duo 2. Well, clearly Surface Duo 2 does not have a smaller footprint. This is just a poorly worded article, but what this person's bias may have been was the aspect ratio is funny, so certain apps don't look right, so that's just what they wrote because they didn't really think through what they were writing. That's just not true. They worded this in a way that is just objectively false. And then they close this thing out by saying, in other words, there's no compelling use cases for the Duo 2, which is one of the sillier things I've ever heard somebody write. Because if you thought about this for literally 5 seconds, you would know that that's not the case. And I tweeted out a few examples here, right? What about using your bank app and a calculator? What about using YouTube and literally anything else? What about taking notes on an article that you're reading? What about fantasy football? I'm setting my lineup while I'm looking at analytics. I mean, and as I said here, I could literally do this all day long, and at least one other person tweeted an example as well. I could name ways, use cases until the cows come home because there's a million. But this writer here came in with the idea that, again, Duo is a bad device, therefore there's no use case for it. So we're just not thinking critically here. And honestly, if I'm going to be really harsh here, what I'm seeing is a hot take. I'm seeing an edgy hot take meant to either make people laugh. It's meant to get people in the comments saying, ha, 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 I can't believe Duo's so bad. Did you hear how he ripped it apart? What a terrible device. All the while, there are people who are using Duo and Duo 2 and actually enjoying the thing. And they read this and they go, man, this guy, he's more concerned with just making his hot takes and just ripping this thing than he is about being factually correct. And it makes you not want to read at least makes me not want to read anything else on this website. Now, there's another thing that I want to point out too, because people often talk about the aspect ratio on Duo and they talk about how it's bad or, it's cramped or it's whatever. Well, let's look at something here real quick because this got posted the other day and it kind of made me laugh a little bit. So this was posted on The Verge's Twitter account. This is a 16 by 18 monitor. And it's meant to be a multitasking powerhouse. You can see it there written by The Verge. It's a multitasking powerhouse. Now, I want you to look long and hard at that image, and then I want your eyes to slowly transfer from over there to over here, and I want you to just say what comes to mind to you in the comments. Do you see is there any sort of parallel that you could possibly come up with there, right? Is there anything you can think of? And then let me do this real quick. So we've got a multitasking powerhouse. Now, is it possible that now we're seeing two of these multitasking powerhouses side by side, and now I can fold them up and I can put them in my pocket? What I want to know from you guys is why is it that companies, that websites, that writers can understand this aspect ratio is great for productivity because it lets you see more. And in this instance, he's split windowing it, which is something that I got to be clear to you, you cannot do on Duo. So I totally get that. He's got two 16 by 9 aspect ratio screens sort of stacked up. But even if you're not split windowing this thing, it's still going to be a multitasking device, because if you're going through text documents or things like that, it's effectively the aspect ratio of a sheet of paper, which is something that human beings are used to using. We've been using since, since the first caveman was walking around with a club on his shoulder. It reminds me of, something like the Surface. It's that 3:2 aspect ratio. And people go, oh man, it's taller. There's more space to do things. It's not multimedia focused. It's focused on getting things done, being more productive. So you basically take that and you rotate it and you've got that, or you've got this. So again, why is it that people, writers, authors, websites can understand that here, but the second you fold it up and put it in your pocket, it's useless, it's too cramped, you can't do anything with it? All of this, to me, is just bias. The bias coming in is that Duo sucks. So even when we can see things that make sense here, we refuse to see them when they're in your pocket. And look, I'm sure that people can make arguments about how it's slightly different or whatever. I'm sure I'm going to hear from you people, and that's fine. Please do. Please comment down below how I'm wrong if you think I'm wrong. But I don't think I'm wrong. I think that it's pretty clear that some of these writers are just trying to tell people what they already think, because people like to read articles that tell them what they already thought. It makes them feel smart, it makes them feel like they're in on the joke, and it makes them feel good. But unfortunately, it is not conducive towards pushing a conversation forward, towards educating people, towards actually giving people beneficial information so that they can make an informed purchase, which is the job of a reviewer. The job of a reviewer should not be hot takes to get clicks to earn more money. It should be to serve the public. And I fear that job is being failed by some people. And again, I don't want to just make this sound like I'm just dumping on this Android Authority article because it's such a small sample. Okay. So it's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying the 2 paragraphs I read are similar to a lot of other paragraphs I've read from a lot of other authors that I don't think make any sense and that I think sound as though this might be what's happening. So guys, I'd love to know what you think about all this in the comments down below. How do you think bias is affecting not just the tech world, but more broadly, the world around us? This desire to be told what we already think, and then the desire to make money by telling you what you already thought. How do you think that's working out for the world broadly? I don't think it's working out very well, but I'd love to know what you guys think in those comments down below. Thanks for making it to the end of today's video, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.